Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Yesterday, Tesla reported its first quarter deliveries and production for the first quarter of 2023. And the stock market, Twitter, and everybody else had a lot to say about it. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's Michael H. and Happy Healthy Life, the newest community members. Thank you so much for your support. You can do the same as well by clicking on join right below this video. You get access to exclusive content on Fridays, as well as access to our private Discord. Thank you so much. So Tesla produced 441,000 units in the first quarter of 2023, delivered 423,000 units in the first quarter as well. This is against Wall Street estimates of about 421,000, so it's a slight beat. And because they did a slight beat, the stock is down 7%. So I find this very fascinating. They beat Wall Street estimates, yet the stock price is down. So of course, my question becomes why? And what I love to do on this channel is kind of bring you guys along my journey of just trying to figure out what's going on, just giving you an insight into how I view the story and just trying to get my head wrapped around it. So one of the folks that I really follow closely is Gary Black, a friend of the show. He often gives a lot of insight around why Wall Street is thinking about certain stories a certain way. And one of the things he highlighted is that there is a concern about rising inventories when it comes to Tesla cars, because they're producing more than they're delivering. So it's up about 25% quarter over quarter, essentially, versus delivery growth of 4%. So the question is, okay, so why is this happening? There's a general concern about growing inventories from the buy side, not necessarily Gary himself, but he hears a lot from the buy side of the story. And I'm like, okay, you are the guy that I look for to help me understand why Wall Street's thinking a certain way. So let's deep dive this concept and come along with me to try and figure out what's going on. So there's two comments from the Q3 report of 2022 earnings that Tesla did last year. And here's a transcript. I want to kind of re-engage us into what Elon Musk and Zach Kirkhorn, the CEO and CFO of the company, said, just so we can lay a proper foundation. And so here's what Elon had to say. Actually, I should say growing production by 30% every year because deliveries, we're trying to smooth out the deliveries and not have this crazy delivery wave at the end of every quarter. There weren't enough boats, there weren't enough trains, there weren't enough car carriers to actually support the wave because it got too big. So whether we like it or not, we actually have to smooth out the delivery of cars intra-quarter, meaning in between the quarters, because there aren't just enough transportation objects to move them around. And here's a piggyback from Zach Kirkhorn, the CFO of the company. Just to put this in perspective, roughly 2/3 of our Q3 deliveries occurred in September and 1/3 in the final 2 weeks. As a result, we have begun to smooth the regional builds throughout the quarter to reduce our peak needs for outbound logistics. We expect this to simplify our operations, reduce costs, and improve the experience to our customers. And as we look ahead, our plans show that we're on track for the 50% annual growth production this year. This was back in Q3. So here's a chart that really helps explain this. This is from @Piloli on Twitter. I really suggest you follow them. And this really describes what this wave is, just to put it into perspective. The green area is the inventory levels as a percentage of Tesla's production. So the way to read this is that back in Q2 of 2017, over 45% of Tesla's production was equivalently tied in inventory. So if Tesla produced, say, 50,000 units in that quarter, this is likely way less, like 30,000, almost 50%, so almost 15,000 cars were in inventory towards the end of the quarter. And then as they progress through the quarters, you can see these crazy waves in inventory. And this is what the folks at Tesla are complaining about, is like, we keep building inventory and then we get crushed. We keep building inventory and then we get crushed. And this whole thing here is what's so hard to manage, because they have to essentially pump out those things. So what they decided to do around Q3 of 2022, based on the guidance we got from Tesla, is like, hey, we're going to try to make the wave smoother by making the inventory more even. And so we've been able to see this in data, which is so fascinating. So you've seen this dip in inventory because of COVID, and then starting the beginning of last year, towards the middle of last year, you started to get this return of the inventory coming back, with the goal to try and keep this inventory somewhere aligned, like just flat for the whole year. And this is sort of a graphical representation of what smoothing out the delivery wave means from Tesla's perspective. Let's go ahead and look at a different way so it's maybe a little bit easier to understand. Before we do that, I would love it if you throw me a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show this to more people. Thank you so much. And if you want to see more content from me, feel free to click on subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is another way of looking at it as well. This is from James Catt at Tesla Fan MTL, another great account to follow on Twitter. Very similar way of looking at this, but this is based on the quarterly inventory of cars and then also days of inventory, which is that initial graph that Gary was explaining, basically how many days of inventory that Tesla have all across its supply chain. But what's really interesting here, if you forget this typo here, this is supposed to say Q1 of 23, it's 16 days of inventory, which is sort of mirroring where Tesla was before the pandemic really hit. So you can see that sort of return to normalcy when it comes to inventory levels. Even though the inventory number is much higher, the days of inventory is returning to levels that were pre-pandemic before the supply chain basically, you know what it did. I don't have to explain that too much. And so if we take that 16 number of days on hand and compare it to the industry average, this is the industry average as of the end of this quarter, so as of the end of March, for all automakers in the United States. So Chrysler has 130 days on hand. Jeep, Buick, and Volvo have about 120 days on hand. The national average is very close to 60 days. Toyota, which is best in class according to legacy automakers, is 25 days. And then Tesla is currently sitting at almost half the rate of Toyota when it comes from days on hand of inventory. Just to put into perspective what the concern might be and how it relates to Tesla's competition. Even with this concern of growing inventories, they appear to be very well positioned, especially in relation to every single other automaker. But that doesn't still tell the full story. If you look at the new European inventory, basically for new cars in Europe for Tesla, each one of these colors is a different model. So the red line is a Model 3, the the blue is a Model Y, the green is a Model S, and the orange is a Model X. You can see that even though S and X are a very small percentage of the inventory, it's still about the same. But since really the end of February, we've seen this this decreasing in inventory for Model 3 and Y, which means that there's not a lot of cars in inventory in Europe for really any model. If we switch over to the United States and we also look at the S and X, you can see that the X and X inventory towards the end of this quarter, beginning of this month in April, you can see that it had a spike somewhere at the beginning of the quarter, and then towards quarter end, I'm guessing they did a push and they purged a lot of that inventory out with an average of about 1,000 units on hand. So about 1,000 units on hand of S and X in the United States. And then if we look at the Model 3 and Y, you can see that ever since they did that price decrease and that initial dump of inventory, it looks like, or people were waiting to buy their car because of the EV tax credit, you saw this giant, basically, inventory dump, and inventories have held quite stable around the 600 to 800 total units in the United States. And so if we add all those up and then assume a roundabout number for China, we don't have great numbers, but assume it's just basically equal to Europe and the US, since a lot of the cars that Tesla sells are in China, you can assume about 5,000 to 10,000 cars on dealer lots globally. But this is compared to the 90,000 at 88,000 in total, which obviously implies that most of the inventory seems to be on boats and trucks and not really sitting on dealer lots. It's getting to the way of dealer lots, which speaks very closely to what Tesla's saying, which is undoing the wave. They're trying to fill the pipelines, right? The pipelines are being filled so that they don't have to continually order a giant amount of essentially containers, trucks, and boats to try and get that inventory out to the customer so they can essentially meet their goals by the end of the quarter or the end of the year. So we're seeing this playing out real time through data. So what now? What does this mean within the context of Tesla's goals for 2023 and what Tesla's trying to achieve based on the guidance they gave us in Q4? Real quick, before we deep dive that, I have a newsletter that you can access, farzadmisbahi.substack.com. It's right in the description. I talk about EVs, Tesla, AI, technology, and whatever piques my interest every single week. I would greatly appreciate it if you check that out. Thank you so much. So here's a comment from Q4 2022 earnings from Elon Musk. Let's just review what he said and try to tie all this up. So, our internal production potential is actually closer to 2 million vehicles, but we were saying 1.8 million because there's just always seems to be some freaking force majeure, basically something that goes wrong, just crazy, that you can't prevent. That happens somewhere on Earth, and we don't control if there's earthquakes, tsunamis, wars, et cetera, et cetera. So if it's a smooth year without some big supply chain interruption, we actually have the potential to do 2 million cars this year. We're not committing to that, but I'm just saying that's the potential. And so let's test that thesis. Let's see if that's actually they're on the path to get there now that we have more data around Q1. So Giga Berlin just announced on March 25th, which is about a week ago, hit 5,000 builds per week, 1 year after delivering the first vehicles. Giga Texas, basically the Austin factory, they just achieved building 4,000 Model Ys this week, and this was as of April 2nd, so as of yesterday. Right? Yesterday, yep. I don't know my days anymore. And so if we total these up for all the factories that Tesla has open right now, so Berlin has 5,000 weekly. This is peak, right? Peak production. Don't think of it as an average, but as a peak. Berlin has 5,000. Austin has 4,000. Fremont has 13,000, which is about 650,000 per year divided by 50 weeks in the year, which is right around what they're doing. And Shanghai is the same math, 1 million per year divided by 50 weeks, about 20,000. So Tesla at its peak capacity has about 42,000 units per week of production capacity from every single one of its factories as of present day, if they were all running at 100% of the time. This implies a quarterly peak run rate of 546,000 units per quarter and a yearly peak run rate of 2.18 million units per year. So within that context, if Tesla was to do that if they were able to achieve peak production every single week rather, looks like they already have the capacity to achieve that 2 million rate goal. However, this obviously will require them to maximize the utilization of current scale. And that's what's so hard about being a car manufacturer, really, for anybody, is that you have to make sure everything goes great every single day. And of course, that peak production rate, even though it exists, it's going to be hard to achieve consistently through the rest of the year, but it does exist. This also gives Tesla the ability to have the most efficient use of factories, which obviously will really, really help margin, because you're essentially utilizing what you have now and you're just cranking more units out of those facilities. So your cost per unit comes down because you already have all the equipment, you have all the factories, you have all the people. You're just pushing more things through the same exact fixed cost structure. So that really helps Tesla. So really there's two big questions that Tesla has to answer to really live up to its Q4 guidance. And I'm guessing we'll get a lot more of that in Q1 report in about 3 weeks. Can Tesla secure and push enough material through its factories? So can they really get the material they need to push enough stuff to the factories to get to that 2.2 million unit that looks like they already have secured from a production perspective? And how will Tesla generate 30% more demand versus Q1 deliveries? So that 30% more demand is basically that 550,000 units-ish that they can produce if they were at peak versus the 420,000 they did in Q1 in deliveries. And so how will that additional 30% come, right? Will it be more price decreases? Is it already locked up? And do they just need to get it out to more people? Is it advertising through Twitter? Is it supercharger credits? I'm really curious to see your thoughts around that in the comment section below. This is really the big question for Tesla in 2023 and the stock price, I'm guessing. And what will happen to margins as that happens? If there's more price decreases that need to happen to get to that 2 million unit number, that 2.2 million unit number that is really at peak, what does that mean to does that really hit margins, or is there another way that Tesla's going to be able to achieve those production and delivery targets? And just a heads up, for tomorrow, I'm going to do a Q1 2023 earnings preview. I was going to do it today, but I still have to do a little bit more work. But I definitely wanted to get a video out to you guys so you can kind of see where I'm at from this perspective, how I'm thinking about this story. And yeah, and I would really love to hear your thoughts about where your head is at, because the stock market was predicting one thing. They got what they wanted. They were unhappy with it. And so I'm like, okay, so why were you unhappy? And that's what I'm trying to test out in this video. And from the data that I'm seeing, I'm like, okay, so it's just part of the plan. We're still going a certain way. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. If you want to support the channel, you can purchase some merch by using the link in the description. And you can also support the channel by purchasing Athletic Greens using a coupon where you get free travel packs and free vitamin D. Thank you so much for your support. So Q1 earnings coming up in about 2.5 weeks. We'll do our usual coverage on this channel as well. We'll do a mega stream of some sort, and we'll go for 4 hours, 5 hours, and talk about everything that gets reported. But until then, I'll continue to do my coverage on the auto market, Tesla, and whatever else sort of comes to mind. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was informative and helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.